Before we get into the video, I do just want to apologize about the audio. We just moved into our new house and we're still getting everything set up. So as of right now, the recording studio is looking pretty bare. So there is a little bit of an echo. I do apologize. We'll have that fixed pretty soon. Thank you guys so much for sticking around and let's get into the video. The Gleaming Depths update introduced a whole host of new content, including so many different weapons. And of course, we're doing a series where we cover them all. In the last video, we covered the pretty disappointing Valkyrie, so if you haven't seen that, make sure you do. I'll leave it in the description as usual. And in this video today, we'll be covering the newly added unique Gauss Rifle, the Flatliner. Now, is this weapon a letdown or a diamond in the rough? Let's figure it out together in this video, but I'm pretty sure we all know the answer. But before we get into the stats of this weapon, the testing, and to see how good or terrible this weapon actually is, let's talk about how you get your hands on one of these bad boys for yourselves. And if you can't tell already, you can get this from the Gleaming Depths raid, but specifically you could get it from Stage 3 of the raid, and it has a 5% drop chance, just like all of the other guns we've covered so far. So this is pretty easy, even if you're a lower player or a lower level player, because chances are you could probably get a carry or two through the raid enough times to get these. So just try and join raid teams if you're low level, or have some of your kind friends in the Wasteland carry you through a raid or two, maybe 5, and you should get your hands on basically all of the raid weapons. Like I said, if you're a lower level, pray you don't get kicked from joining a random one. It does suck that it's kind of the halfway point, so unfortunately, this weapon is a huge pain to farm, because if you don't get it the first time, you have to basically either finish the entire raid or restart at the third phase of the raid. So it's kind of annoying, but thankfully, if you are able to do the raid content with you or your friends, and if you just run through it at least 10 times, you'll basically get every single weapon that the new raid content offers. Just make sure that you do every single stage if you want the different weapons that come with it. Like I said, this one could be attained from Stage 3 of the raid, and it has a 5% drop chance. Now that you know how to get one of these bad boys for yourself, let's talk about the legendary effects real quick. I'll go through the effect list as you should be able to see on screen, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth once I get finished. So first up, we have Assassins, which is a plus 50% damage to humans. Then after that, we have the VATS Enhanced, which is plus 50% chance to hit a target in VATS. Not bad. After that, we have Nimble, which is plus 100% faster movement speed while aiming. We all know how this one goes. And then after that, we have Conductors, which is critical hits restore 5% of health and action points for players and teammates within a 50-foot radius. And then after that, we have some non-legendary effects, but they're just thrown on there anyway, and that's plus 40% reload speed and minus 5 durability. So all pretty standard for these new raid weapons, how they have additional effects, or even a lot of the unique weapons in Fallout 76, they have some additional effects thrown on there. But as you can see from the list, it's pretty similar to the Valkyrie. It's very scenario specific. With the whole entire Assassin's legendary effects, which is kind of unfortunate because it's a decent weapon. If you're looking for a new stealth Gauss Rifle, it's pretty decent. That 4-star legendary effect, it's okay. It does help with usability a little bit more, the Conductors, especially if you're in I guess a group setting where some people are taking a lot of damage. However, I mean, we'll be honest, it's kind of useless, especially on a weapon like this. But it allows you to take on a slight healer / buffer role in a raid team, but honestly, it could be better for DPS. It does do a decent amount of damage if you're rocking a stealth build, or obviously if you're a low level, it would be amazing to get a 4-star legendary unique Gauss Rifle. So it's a fun experience to use. Again, it's okay. More so if you're a lower level, but honestly, if you're a vet, you obviously have a lot of weapons that are better than this, so you could probably throw this bad boy on the shelf, unfortunately. But I mean, it's a Gauss Rifle. They kind of dropped the ball with them in Fallout 76, unfortunately. So most of you know that this one, it's not looking too good for it so far. But those are the legendary effects. It could be better, could be a lot better. Very scenario specific, unfortunately, just like the Valkyrie. They could have really helped this whole entire weapon out. I get what they were trying to do, but yeah, they kind of dropped the ball on it. None of these effects really synergize well with each other at all. I mean, the assassins is kind of useful if you're going up against like cultists or anything like that, or like blood eagles. But again, if you have a fixer, you could just like two shot them anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And obviously, Gauss rifles take a while to charge up and everything like that, so it's a little frustrating to use from time to time. I'll be honest, but those are the effects. Moving on. And then before we get into the testing, there are some things that I also want to throw out there. The weapon stats for this weapon, obviously, they're 140 damage stock, 5 magazine stock, and a 35 AP cost. When you're using it in that stock, without any effects or anything. But this weapon can also be modded, so it can be a little bit better. I am just using a stock version of this in the video, so then you guys could see exactly what it does straight out of the box. And then I am not using a stealth build. Also, I'm using a slight stealth build, but not. I'm just using kind of my normal build. I can stealth though, but yeah. And then obviously I wanted to mention the look of this weapon. It actually is probably the best looking out of the bunch. It looks fantastic for a weapon in 76. That red sleek coloring, chef's kiss. It looks fucking beautiful. And it's actually supposed to resemble the Ultrasight Terror. And it looks amazing. You know me, I'm a sucker for a nice looking weapon, and this one definitely tickles my fancy. So I just want to throw that in there. So now let's get on to the testing. All right, so let's jump right into the waters and talk about the testing with this bad boy. If you saw my last couple of raid videos or any of my other weapon reviews, I'll start with how this gun is against lower, weaker enemies, and then work our way up to how this thing is against bosses and even the new raid content where you can get it to drop from. So the first thing I want to talk about, obviously, is going up against lower level enemies that are the weaker ones. Without a doubt, the Flatliner can handle itself fine just against low tier enemies like your mole miners, your ghouls, your scourge, your blood eagles, your cultists. Any of those enemies, this thing does great. I mean, obviously, it really shines against those cultist blood eagles, anything like that, because of the assassins, and then obviously because you can use it in stealth really well. But you could one shot or even two shot most weaker enemies, and even against non-human lower tier enemies, this thing still will decimate them with no issue. Really, it's completely fine. This thing in a stealth build, and you'll be 100% able to one-shot most of these enemies without a problem. Like I said, we're talking about the lower level, weaker enemies, like your mole miners, your ghouls, your scourge, everything like that. This weapon will be able to basically one-shot them. It shines specifically, though, against those humans, those weaker level humans and everything like that. But obviously, as we move on to your mid-tier enemies, like the super mutants and the higher armor enemies, again, like Snallygasters, I mean, it could still carry its own, but you'll really be relying on stealth damage to help you get your DPS increase to really get through these enemies a little bit faster. But unfortunately, that increase in enemy health and armor does lead to a solid damage decrease against these types of enemies. You'll have luck, like better luck with using basically any other type of weapon against these type of guys. Like I said, the damage starts to drop off pretty noticeably at this point. Still usable 100%. Like you could still 2-shot, 3-shot. I mean, if you don't have like Nerd Raged or any, I guess, perks to increase your damage, you may struggle a little bit more against these enemies, like it may be a 4-shot or even a 5-shot or the whole magazine. But I mean, I was able to like 3-shot super mutants with this thing. It obviously sucks, but like it's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? It's not like the worst weapon in the entire world. It's okay. I mean, it's not a pipe pistol or a pipe fucking revolver or anything like that, but I mean, it's definitely no fixer, railway, or literally anything else. At least the Valkyrie was able to output more DPS because it had a larger magazine and it was a fully automatic weapon. This Gauss Rifle against really starts to drop off against super mutants. However, if you do have a stealth build, you will be able to one-shot the super mutants. Now, I also wanted to cover your extremely tough boss type enemies like the Mirelurk Queen, the Super Mutant Behemoth. You guys know all these types of enemies. Unfortunately, because this thing is a non-automatic rifle and Bethesda shows no love to that playstyle unless you're using it in stealth, the damage, again, significant drop off in damage, unfortunately. This thing is a pretty gimmicky weapon and it just does not carry over well to other scenarios. Even with a full stealth build, you won't be able to like one shot You may be able to two-shot the behemoths and everything like that, but again, you'll just have a better luck using any other weapon, especially if it's a fully auto weapon against these enemies. And then obviously the same thing goes for the nuke bosses and everything like that. You'll be doing very little damage to the Scorch Beast Queen, Earl, the neurological warfare robots, everything like that. So you're not really gonna shine in that regard. Actually, it doesn't output enough DPS, and it's not automatic to the point where that 4-star legendary effects really helps and makes it shine. So unfortunately, you're not even going to be really helping out your team. You're just going to be a huge hindrance to it. And then moving on to our last category of testing, I just wanted to talk about their raids real quick. Obviously, this thing's not able to output any DPS against like nuke bosses or anything like that. You're not really going to be doing too much damage to help out your team with the new raid content. You're going to be a huge hindrance to them. Like I said a couple seconds ago, it's just that 4-star effect is not useful enough on a non-automatic weapon to make it a good enough effect to where you're actually helping out your team with the buff and the healing and regenerating all their AP and everything like that. Again, you're just going to be a hindrance and you're just going to get yourself killed. So do not use this thing in raids unless you are, I guess, a level 50. But you'll using using normal AP boosting items and stim packs, and you have your whole entire gimmick of this weapon solved instantly. Plus, you will not be healing your teammates enough to outperform stim packs. Like there's the damage that they'll get from the raid bosses are still too much damage to be able to regenerate the health lost from just using your 5% healing factor from this weapon on nearby players. So again, pretty useful, unfortunately. But it does have some good things about it. Like I said, now that testing is over, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, starting off with the good, since you saw the ugly throughout this entire video of how, I guess, inefficient this weapon is. But let's talk about the good, or at least the biggest positives that come with this weapon. But I will just say, it's not really a positive that is on here, and I did talk about it earlier. This weapon looks fantastic. I think that this weapon is the best looking weapon out of all of the raid weapons. So, I mean, if you're going to get it for anything, or if you're going to want to go out for anything, I guess throwing it on your shelf wouldn't be too bad. It's a very difficult to obtain paperweight for most players. So if you could get one, good for you. Throw it on your shelf. It looks really nice, and it's probably one of the most detailed guns that Fallout 76 has ever added. Now, onto the first positive that I wanted to mention, and I keep mentioning it this entire video. The biggest positive I see is this weapon with stealth. It's extremely adaptable to that playstyle. You could definitely one-shot a decent amount of mobs with this thing. Unfortunately, if you're not using it in stealth, it's really not that great. But it still can be done. Like I said, you could still use it, and it is great in stealth. You will be able to one-shot super mutants, two-shot super mutants in stealth, just like with other non-automatic weapons. So it's always fun to see when a new unique weapon is added, and you could throw it into a stealth build. It's always really nice to see that, because again, stealth doesn't really get too much love in Fallout 76. Later on in the game, you could obviously use a stealth build for basically the entire campaign and all of the story, but it's just not the best playstyle to use in Fallout 76 for the end game. And the next thing that I want to talk about kind of goes hand in hand with how adaptable this thing, and it's just extremely fun. Just to go right off that point, another positive I can think about is just how fun this thing is to use. It's great in stealth. You could really change up your playstyle, because a lot of people don't really use stealth that often, and it's a completely different way to play Fallout 76, and this thing is a great way to get introduced to that stealth playstyle. Plus, since it's an explosive weapon, these stealth ragdolls effects are just so funny to watch. Very similar with the Resolve Breaker, you'll just be sending people all over the place when you are critting them, because it does have that explosive effect with any other Gauss Rifle. So it's pretty nice. And then obviously the next thing that I want to talk about is how positive is how easy it is to, I guess, boost the damage of this thing, or how, like I said, adaptable. It's an energy weapon. It's a non-automatic rifle. It has explosives. So there are a decent amount of perks that you could use to boost this thing's damage, which is nice because not all weapons have that. Like the Valkyrie, the only thing that you could use to boost its damage, or well, no, excuse me, that's a bad example. Scratch that. The Fixer, for example, really, if depending on what what playstyle you use, automatic or non-automatic. There's only one way to boost that weapon's damage. This, though, you can have a couple of cards that will boost its damage. Now, and then after that, I wanted to mention the reload speed. Another thing I love about this weapon is that it has that small little fifth effect that's not really a legendary effect, and a lot of people don't notice it. But it comes with a nice 40% faster reload speed, which is pretty amazing with any weapon that has a fast reload speed is good with me, because it means that you're able to output a little bit more DPS. So yeah, there you go. You know, it's pretty nice. Those are probably the biggest positives that I could see with this weapon. You could boost the damage in a number of ways, which is always really nice when you have a new unique weapon. It sucks when you get, you know, a weapon that's only a automatic rifle and non-explosive, and you could only boost its damage by using one set of perk cards. It's kind of frustrating, and now with this one, you're able to boost the damage at least a little bit more, so you could fully see the potential of this thing, and maybe get this thing to one-shot a few super mutant behemoths. But yeah, great for stealth, super fun, nice reload speed, and of course, really nice to boost the damage of. It's really easy to throw on just a bunch of different perk cards. So basically, whatever build you're using, you should be able just to throw this weapon on and have a couple of perk cards that boost its damage in your current build. And if you watched any of those other raid-specific weapon videos, you know what I'm going to have to say. Every rose has its thorn, every yin has its yang, and every positive has a negative. So there obviously are some bad features about this weapon, and let's get into them. The most obvious that I'm going to throw out here is the low DPS. I know that I did say that one of the positives is you can boost the DPS with this thing pretty easily by just throwing on a bunch of different perk cards. However, it's still not a high enough DPS to be able to compete with the other endgame weapons out there, unfortunately. Like, again, a Fixer or a Railway or even a bloodied Gauss Rifle is still able to outperform this thing in terms of DPS. So the low DPS on this thing kind of just stops it in its track for endgame content, which kind of sucks, because this thing is, you get it from endgame content, and you're not able to use it on the content that you unlock it. It seems pretty shitty. Why would they do that? Doesn't make any sense. They should. I mean, I get that it's an easy way to get that 4-star effect, but if you're going to scrap a bunch of them, but honestly, the 4-star effect isn't even that good. Like, I wouldn't use it on my other weapons. It's just not that great. I mean, I guess it could be okay on like a Gatlin plasma or something like that, because you could low AP cost and you could crit the fuck out of people with it. But I mean, it still wouldn't be that good, because most people are boosting their AP with like coffee or company tea, and most people are popping stim packs whenever they're below 20% health, or whenever they're below 10% health, or whatever the hell. So it just doesn't make any sense that the DPS is so low on this weapon. It kind of sucks. And then following that, also, since this weapon is obtainable from endgame content, the next negative that I see right off the bat with this weapon is how difficult it is to obtain, especially for lower level players. Now, I did say that it could be easy because you could just join a raid team, but I mean, you might get kicked. You might, you know what I mean? It would be pretty, you'll have to jump around from time to time. Some of them may not be doing the raid. Some of them only be farming the first section of the raid. So you may not be able to get your hands on this weapon, unfortunately. You may be able to get a plan from it, but you may not be able to get the weapon. It could just depend. It is a little bit more difficult to get, again, especially because you can't use it on the end game content. So you're kind of just getting this weapon to throw out. It kind of fucking sucks. It would be a lot better if it was the first unique Gauss Rifle that you could get, or the first Gauss Rifle that you get in the game was this thing. I guess that would make kind of a little bit more sense and make it seem okay that it had such shitty effects and non-synergizing effects. But it is what it is. So low DPS and hard to get. The final negative that I wanted to talk about is just the feeling of utter disappointment when using this thing and then switching to a bloodied or even an anti-armor Gauss Rifle, like I said, and seeing how much more damage you could use or do while using a non-unique version of the weapon. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and it makes the weapon feel significantly more depressing. I know I've said this a bunch of times. Well, why farm endgame content when you don't want to use the end game weapons on the end game or in any percentage of the game? It's just, it's a smack in the face. It doesn't make any sense. Why give us an end game content weapon when you could just get a better weapon of the same gun variant, just with better effects? It's just randomly in the Wasteland. It does not make any sense. It's like I said, it just does not make it feel unique. It's just another pile of trash. They're just another piece of trash that you can add to the pile, unfortunately. I feel like they're trying to go with a Borderlands type of vibe with their unique weapons and their legendaries, but they're just not unique enough like the uniques in Borderlands, if that makes any sense. Like, the Sandhawk, it shoots in the hawk pattern and everything like that, and that's really cool, and it does a bunch of damage. And this thing looks like the Ultrasight Terror, but it just kind of sucks. So it's I can see what they're doing. They're just not doing it too well, unfortunately. They're going for like a RPG MMO unique weapon vibe, but they're just kind of missing the entire point of what a unique weapon is supposed to be. They're just trying to get basically one of every single weapon, make it unique, and then throw it in the game. So they could say that they have a unique version of that weapon, even though it's just a fucking Gauss rifle that does more damage against humans, and you get it from a robot-based raid. It doesn't make any sense, but those are the negatives that I find with this weapon. I'm sure that you guys can find more, and please let me know in the comments. Well, ladies and gents of the Wasteland, we've made it to the end of another Fallout 76 video. As you could tell by this video, I really don't like this new weapon too much. It's pretty honestly. You have to use a very, very, very specific build in a very specific scenario to use this weapon. It doesn't make sense to have this weapon come from the robot specific raid or the enclave raid. It just doesn't make any sense, truthfully. It's definitely one of the worst unique weapons in Fallout 76 history, in my opinion. It's definitely up there, just because, again, it's an endgame weapon that you don't even want to use early in the game. I mean, I think it can be decent, like I said, but too specific to be really used at all times. But if you're a lower level carry through the raids and you get one of these things and you don't, for some odd reason, have a fixer or a better weapon, I mean, I guess it'll be okay until you find a decent bloodied weapon or a fixer. What do you think about this weapon? Let me know in the comments. I think it's probably the most underwhelming and disappointing weapon of the raid specific weapons that they added. But who knows? Maybe we'll come across another one when we continue this series. So stick around for next time. And as always, I just want to thank you motherfuckers for watching this motherfucking video, and I will see you in the Wasteland. Seriously, let me know what you think about all of these new weapons that we've covered so far in the comments. Let me know what you think about the Flatliner. I personally think it is a piece of shit, and whoever made this gun probably should be fired from at least their current position at Bethesda. Definitely shouldn't be making unique weapons anymore.